The night had an eerie stillness that belied the storm raging inside me. For years, I had believed that the foundation of my marriage to Laura was built on unwavering trust and shared dreams. Our life together had once been a harmonious tapestry, woven from laughter, whispered secrets, and promises made in the quiet of the night. I had pictured us growing old together, our souls intertwined like the roots of ancient trees. Yet, as time passed, subtle cracks began to show in that delicate veneer of intimacy. It started with the small things, the late-night phone calls she brushed off as work emergencies, the hurried texts she deleted as soon as I glanced over her shoulder, and an almost imperceptible change in her once warm gaze. I remember one particular evening. The soft glow of the living room lamp threw gentle shadows across her face as she whispered into her phone, her eyes darting nervously toward the hallway. My heart clenched with an inexplicable dread, but I chose to believe that there was a rational explanation. After all, in every successful marriage, there are moments of vulnerability and personal space. Yet, as weeks turned into months, the frequency of these anomalies grew impossible to ignore. I began to notice that Laura's phone was never far from her hand, even at dinner. Once, while preparing a meal, I caught a glimpse of an unfamiliar name flashing briefly on her screen: Stephen. It was just a name, yet in the quiet of that moment, it echoed like a tolling bell, heralding the unraveling of the life I thought I knew. One unremarkable afternoon, curiosity and a gnawing intuition pushed me to do the unthinkable. I secretly accessed her computer. I had never intended to pry, but the mounting unease left me no choice. What I found shattered the last fragile illusion of fidelity. A hidden folder discreetly labeled in a way that suggested secrets too dangerous for the light of day. Inside, a collection of intimate photos and feverish, passionate messages exchanged with Stephen, a colleague from her new project, lay in plain digital sight. The images were an assault on my senses. Stolen glances in secluded hotel lobbies, whispered promises in half-lit rooms, and kisses that betrayed a love I had believed was solely mine. Every message was a dagger to my heart, and yet, paradoxically, it also ignited something within me. Instead of succumbing to the pain and devastation, I found a cold, calculated resolve taking shape. I began to see this discovery not as an end, but as the catalyst for reclaiming my dignity and the life I had lost. In the days that followed, I transformed my living room into a covert command center. The walls, once adorned with photographs of our happiest moments, now witnessed the meticulous collection of evidence. Every scrap of damning proof was gathered with the precision of a surgeon. Screenshots of steamy emails that chronicled forbidden rendezvous, detailed logs of phone records that confirmed late-night communications, and even discreet recordings captured during one of her hushed phone calls. Each piece of evidence was carefully archived in a dossier, a silent testament to the betrayal that had forever altered the course of my existence. I spent hours poring over every detail, rewatching video snippets and rereading every whispered confession. In this private hell, I became both the investigator and the executioner of my own heartbreak. I was no longer the man who had once believed in the sanctity of our union. I was a man possessed by a desire for retribution, driven by the need to expose the truth, not just to myself, but to the world that had once celebrated our marriage. As I dug deeper into the labyrinth of Laura's secret life, memories of our early days together came flooding back, moments that now took on a bittersweet hue. I recalled how we had met at a mutual friend's party, her smile as radiant as the summer sun, the way her eyes had shone with promise and ambition. We had built a life together, one filled with shared goals and the comfort of companionship. Yet beneath that veneer, I now recognized the warning signs I had dismissed. The stolen glances, the unexplained absences, the whispered conversations that ended as soon as I entered the room, all had been harbingers of the betrayal to come. In a cruel twist of fate, every moment of our past now seemed tainted by deceit. I could no longer view our shared memories as precious relics of a love that once was. Instead, they had transformed into bittersweet reminders of a trust that had been so ruthlessly violated. And yet, in this darkness, I began to construct a plan, one that would not only reveal Laura's duplicity to the world, but would also serve as my own personal catharsis. After weeks of relentless investigation and sleepless nights, an opportunity presented itself in the most unexpected of places, a prestigious company gala. The event was the pinnacle of our social calendar, an annual affair where colleagues, friends, and influential figures gathered to celebrate success, ambition, and the promise of the future. Laura and I were, at that moment, the very picture of an ideal couple, poised, successful, and enviably united. The irony of it all was almost too cruel to bear. As the evening progressed, beneath the glittering chandeliers and the hum of polite conversation, I realized that this was the perfect stage for my reckoning. The gala, with its carefully orchestrated ambiance and high-powered guests, would soon transform into a theater of truth, where every hidden secret would be exposed with ruthless clarity. I began to rehearse the details in my mind, envisioning each moment as if it were already set in stone. I was determined to ensure that no one in attendance would ever again doubt the veracity of my claims. In the days leading up to the event, I refined every detail of my plan. I rehearsed my speech in the mirror, adjusting my tone to convey a blend of sorrow, resolve, and quiet triumph. I revisited the evidence, reordering the screenshots, phone logs, and recordings into a dossier that left no room for doubt. Every piece of proof was a fragment of a larger mosaic, a mosaic that, when revealed, would shatter the illusion of our perfect life. I spent long hours alone, contemplating the nature of betrayal and the price of revenge. In the solitude of my study, I found myself musing on the human condition, how trust, once broken, leaves scars that time can never fully erase. The pain was palpable, yet within that pain I discovered a perverse sense of purpose. It was as if the very act of exposing Laura's secrets would serve as both a punishment for her transgressions and a balm for my wounded pride. Amidst the whirlwind of my private vendetta, an unexpected encounter provided a momentary distraction from the tumult of my thoughts. One rainy afternoon, while seeking solace in the quiet corner of a local cafe, I met Daniel, a man whose eyes carried the weight of many untold stories. Over steaming cups of coffee, we began to talk, our conversation meandering from trivial observations to deeper, more introspective topics. Daniel, it turned out, had experienced a similar betrayal in his own life. His tale of love lost, and the slow, painful process of reclaiming his identity resonated with me. For the first time in weeks, I felt understood. Our shared pain forged an unspoken bond, and Daniel's quiet wisdom helped me see that while revenge might be cathartic, it could never truly heal the wounds of betrayal. Yet even as his words stirred a flicker of doubt, I remained resolute. My need for retribution was not born out of a desire for vindictive cruelty, but rather from a longing to reclaim a sense of control in a life that had been upended by treachery. The night before the gala, insomnia and a turbulent mix of emotions left me restless. I wandered the quiet corridors of our home, each step echoing like a countdown to the inevitable confrontation. In the solitude of the darkened rooms, I confronted memories of our once happy life together. The quiet mornings spent in laughter, the shared dreams whispered in the soft glow of dawn, and I wondered where it had all gone wrong. Every corner of our house now felt like a shrine to memories that betrayed me. The photographs on the mantle, the trinkets on the shelf, even the sound of our laughter that used to fill the rooms, it all seemed like a cruel reminder of what I had lost. And yet, amid the overwhelming grief, a steely determination took hold. I resolved that the coming day would be my moment of rebirth, a moment when I would no longer be the betrayed, the broken, or the silent sufferer. I would be the man who turned his pain into power. Dawn broke with a deceptive calm, and soon the gala was underway. The grand ballroom, resplendent with lavish decor and bathed in the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, buzzed with the energy of success and ambition. Colleagues, friends, and dignitaries mingled, their laughter and chatter a stark contrast to the storm of emotions that roiled inside me. I moved through the crowd with measured steps, the dossier of evidence safely stowed, away like a secret weapon. Every now and then, I caught fleeting glances from Laura, whose expression oscillated between forced smiles and furtive glances toward the exit. The air was thick with unspoken tension, as if every guest sensed that something was amiss beneath the veneer of celebration. As the evening unfolded, the host called for a toast to the couple, a celebration of our success and a tribute to our enduring partnership. My pulse pounded in my ears as I accepted the honor of speaking on our behalf. In that moment, I realized that this was not merely a speech. It was the culmination of months of planning, pain, and a desperate need to reclaim my shattered identity. I stepped up to the podium, my eyes scanning the expectant faces in the crowd. The room hushed, and for a few agonizing seconds, I was lost in a sea of memories, of promises made, of shared dreams, and of the betrayal that had transformed everything. But then, as if guided by an inexorable force, I began to speak. My voice was steady, laced with a sorrow that was both personal and profound. I recounted in carefully measured words the journey of love that had once defined us, a journey that had taken unexpected turns and led to a crossroads where loyalty was betrayed. I spoke of trust, of dreams, and of the devastating impact of infidelity, all the while keeping my gaze fixed on a face I once adored. Then, as I reached the crescendo of my address, I signaled the technician to activate the audiovisual system. The first image appeared on the giant screen, a snapshot of Laura and Stephen, caught in a clandestine embrace in a shadowed corridor. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. One by one, the images followed, a montage of secret rendezvous, whispered promises, and stolen moments that laid bare a love that had existed behind my back. Each photograph, each text message, and every recorded confession was displayed in stark detail. The room, once filled with the din of celebration, fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. In that surreal moment, every guest was forced to confront the painful reality. The foundation of my marriage, the life we had built, was nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. Laura's eyes widened in disbelief, her carefully maintained facade crumbling before the eyes of everyone present. The shock was palpable, and as murmurs filled the room, I stood there, unwavering and resolute, my soul a tumult of sorrow and vindication. The gallery of images continued to play, each slide a testament to betrayal. I could see the faces of our colleagues, the glimmer of shock and sympathy in their eyes. It was as if the universe had conspired to bring every hidden truth into the unforgiving light. In that charged atmosphere, my heart both ached and soared. I had reclaimed my dignity in the only way I knew how, even as a part of me mourned the loss of a love that had turned so bitter. I could no longer view the evidence as mere documents of betrayal. They were the fragments of a life that had been irreversibly altered. Every detail had been recorded, every whisper captured, and in doing so, I had laid my soul bare before the world. The price of revenge was steep, but it was a price I was willing to pay to restore a semblance of order in a universe turned chaotic by deceit. As the images faded and the screen went dark, the silence was broken by a single, anguished cry from Laura. In that moment, the gravity of my actions hit me with a force I had not fully anticipated. The cost of exposing her secrets was not just her humiliation, but the shattering of a bond that had once been sacred. The applause that followed was a mixture of shock, pity, and the collective realization that nothing in life is ever as simple as it seems. I stepped down from the podium, my hands trembling not with fear, but with the weight of irreversible choices. In the ensuing chaos, as guests whispered among themselves and the room filled with disquieted murmurs, I felt an odd calm settle over me. A calm born from the certainty that I had taken control of my destiny. The night was far from over, and though the journey ahead would be fraught with pain and uncertainty, I knew that the path of vengeance had irrevocably set me on a new course. In the days that followed, the fallout from that fateful evening spread like wildfire. The company's corridors became rife with hushed conversations, and I found myself both the subject of sympathy and the target of veiled judgment. Laura withdrew into herself, her once radiant spirit marred by an undeniable stain of disgrace. And while the public spectacle had given me a sense of catharsis, it also forced me to confront the deeper implications of my actions. I spent long hours in solitude, grappling with the duality of my emotions. There was a part of me that celebrated the exposure, a part that felt liberated from the chains of deception. Yet another part mourned the irrevocable loss of a relationship that had once promised so much. It was a bittersweet victory, a victory that came at the cost of innocence, trust, and the dreams we had once nurtured together. As I sat at my desk, the remnants of the evening's evidence scattered across my workspace, I realized that the night had been only the beginning. The dossier, meticulously compiled over months, had not only served as a weapon against betrayal, but had also become a mirror reflecting the complexities of human emotion. In those hours of solitude, I began to understand that revenge, while satisfying in its moment of revelation, was an endless journey, a journey through the labyrinth of the human heart where pain and healing intertwined in the most unexpected ways. I vowed to carry forward, not as a man defined solely by his anguish, but as one who had faced the darkest corners of love and emerged with a resolve to rebuild. The scars of that night would remain, a permanent reminder of the betrayal that had forever altered my life. And yet, with every breath, I took a step toward rediscovering myself, a man who would no longer be a passive victim of circumstance, but an active architect of his destiny. In the long aftermath of that fateful evening, the taste of bittersweet victory lingered like a scar upon my soul. The dawn that followed was heavy with consequence. The once familiar light filtered through our bedroom curtains with a sense of betrayal, each ray a painful reminder of the gala and the revelations that had changed everything. The house, which for so long had been our shared sanctuary, now whispered secrets of deception and regret in every creaking floorboard and distant echo. I awoke to an overwhelming silence that was as oppressive as it was final. Laura was no longer beside me. In the cold clarity of that morning, I realized that the explosive night had irrevocably altered the course of our lives. There was no turning back now. The secrets had been laid bare for the world to see, and the fallout would extend far beyond our fractured marriage. As days melted into weeks, the fallout from the public exposure took on a life of its own. Our once celebrated lives, built on carefully crafted appearances, now disintegrated beneath the weight of whispered conversations and scandalous headlines. Colleagues avoided eye contact, and those who once congratulated us now murmured condolences or cast sideway glances steeped in judgment. I felt the icy tendrils of isolation wrap around me, even as I clung to the satisfaction of having reclaimed my dignity. Yet within that isolation lay an unexpected clarity. I began to analyze every moment, every interaction that had led to this turning point. It wasn't solely about vengeance. It was about the discovery of a life built on illusions and the painful realization that trust, once shattered, leaves no room for innocence. I scrutinized not just Laura's actions, but also my own failings, the silent acceptance of small betrayals that had slowly corroded the foundation of our union. Determined not to allow my life to be defined by this one act of retribution, I sought solace in the quiet corners of introspection. I began interviewing mutual acquaintances and colleagues who had witnessed the subtle unraveling of our marital fabric. Each conversation was a small piece of a larger puzzle, a mosaic of emotions, perceptions, and regrets. I discovered that beneath the polished veneer of our social circle, many had harbored secrets of their own. It was a revelation that, while painful, sparked an unexpected empathy. We were all, in some way, prisoners to our own vulnerabilities. In the course of these interactions, I encountered individuals whose lives had been marred by betrayal, and their stories resonated deeply with me. I began to compile these narratives into a personal anthology, a testament not just to my own suffering, but to the universal pain of shattered trust. The research became an unexpected catharsis, transforming my rage into a sober, almost academic inquiry into the nature of love and deception. With the public spectacle behind me, I was left with the intimate aftermath, a quiet, relentless mourning that seeped into every corner of my being. There were nights when I would lie awake, haunted by memories of Laura's laughter and the way her eyes once sparkled with unspoken promises. These recollections, however painful, were interwoven with the raw truth of her betrayal. The internal battle between longing for what was lost and the need to preserve the self I had reclaimed became my constant companion. In the solitude of these sleepless nights, I found my mind drifting back to the gala. I replayed the sequence of events over and over, wondering if the calculated display of evidence had been too merciless or perhaps too necessary. Was the unveiling of every hidden truth a step toward liberation or an act of self-destruction? As I wrestled with these questions, the once blinding satisfaction of revenge slowly morphed into a heavy burden of regret, a burden that weighed on me as much as the evidence itself. It was during one of these restless nights that I received an unexpected message. A handwritten letter slipped under the door of my study. The envelope bore no return address, and the handwriting was unfamiliar yet strikingly sincere. With trembling hands, I opened it and discovered a confession that was as heartbreaking as it was candid. The letter was from someone who had observed our lives from the shadows, a friend of Laura's who had always sensed that something was amiss. In the letter, she spoke of Laura's own torment and desperation, her sense of entrapment in a marriage that demanded perfection at the cost of her own identity. The letter's contents stirred something deep within me. For the first time since that night of public humiliation, I felt a pang of empathy, a recognition that in every betrayal there is a tangled web of pain, fear, and unmet needs. While it did not excuse Laura's actions, it humanized her in a way I had not allowed myself to consider before. It was a turning point, nudging me toward the realization that revenge, while momentarily satisfying, was not a cure for the deeper wounds of our broken lives. In the weeks that followed, I embarked on a journey of reconstruction, not of the past that had been so brutally severed, but of the future that lay in shards on the floor of our once shared life. I left behind the trappings of our old existence, the extravagant dinners, the glossy photos of a perfect life, and sought refuge in a quieter, more honest pursuit of self-discovery. I enrolled in courses on literature and philosophy, immersing myself in worlds that offered new perspectives on love, betrayal, and redemption. Every lecture and every page of the books I read chipped away at the remnants of my anger, replacing them slowly with a cautious hope. I began to see that my quest for revenge, as meticulously orchestrated as it had been, was only one part of a larger narrative, a narrative that demanded healing and, ultimately, forgiveness. I spent long hours journaling, pouring my conflicted emotions into words that sought to make sense of the chaos. In those moments, I discovered that the path to healing was neither linear nor swift. It was a meandering journey through valleys of despair and peaks of unexpected revelation. Fate, it seemed, had more lessons in store for me. During a visit to a small bookshop nestled in a quiet side street, I encountered Marianne, an elderly woman with kind, weathered eyes and a gentle smile. Marianne had lived through her own share of loss and betrayal, and her quiet strength resonated with me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Over countless cups of tea in the cozy confines of her living room, she shared stories of resilience and the slow, painful process of mending a heart broken by life's injustices. Marianne's stories were not grand epics of triumph, but quiet, unassuming narratives of everyday courage. She spoke of love lost and regained in the small gestures of kindness, of forgiveness that was not an act of weakness, but a deliberate choice to reclaim one's power. In her soft-spoken wisdom, I found a mirror reflecting the possibility of redemption, even for a man as battered and conflicted as I. With each conversation, I felt the heavy chains of my own bitterness begin to loosen, replaced by the tentative hope of a future rebuilt on honesty rather than revenge. Months turned into a season of introspection and gradual transformation. I found myself at a crossroads where the thirst for vengeance began to lose its grip, replaced by the quiet determination to reclaim my life on my own terms. The dossier of evidence that had once been my weapon now lay dormant on a shelf, a silent relic of a chapter that had closed too abruptly. I began to see that while the pain of betrayal was irreversible, it did not have to define my future. I revisited old hobbies and rediscovered passions that had long been suppressed beneath the weight of marital expectations. I took long walks in the park, letting nature's rhythms soothe the jagged edges of my wounded spirit. I reconnected with friends who had stood by me through the darkest days, and their support, though sometimes laced with cautious distance, reminded me that life, even in its most shattered moments, could still offer unexpected beauty. As I slowly pieced together a new identity, I also took tentative steps toward professional growth. I began channeling my energies into creative endeavors, writing essays and short stories that explored themes of loss, betrayal, and the quest for redemption. In the act of creation, I found a measure of catharsis, a way to transform the raw material of my pain into something meaningful and perhaps healing. Yet, as time passed, the specter of the past continued to linger. One chilly autumn evening, as I strolled through a park painted in shades of amber and gold, I found myself face to face with the inevitable. Laura. She was sitting on a weathered bench beneath a sprawling oak, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The sight of her stirred a tumult of emotions, regret, sorrow, and a longing for what might have been. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The air was thick with unspoken words and memories too painful to revisit. Finally, she broke the silence, her voice trembling with remorse. "I never wanted it to end like this," she whispered, eyes glistening with unshed tears. In that vulnerable admission lay a raw humanity that neither of us could ignore. It was as if the collision of our shattered lives had created a brief, fragile bridge over the chasm of our mutual suffering. We talked for what felt like hours, our conversation a hesitant dance between apology and the recognition of irrevocable loss. Laura spoke of the emptiness that had driven her to seek solace in another's arms, of a loneliness so profound that she had believed betrayal was the only escape. I listened, torn between the lingering embers of my own pain and the realization that our lives, now split and scarred, were not easily mended by words alone. That encounter, brief as it was, marked a turning point. It forced me to confront the reality that revenge, no matter how meticulously planned, had not erased the pain. It had only transformed it. I began to understand that true healing would not come from public shaming or the meticulous documentation of transgressions, but from the quiet, persistent work of forgiving, not for her sake, but for my own. In the wake of our conversation, I found myself at the threshold of a new beginning. The public spectacle had been a catharsis, a moment of unburdening that allowed me to reclaim a semblance of control over my destiny. But as I stood at this crossroads, I recognized that the path ahead was uncertain. It was not a road paved with the satisfaction of revenge, but a winding journey towards self-forgiveness and the reconstruction of a life torn apart by betrayal. I made the decision to seek professional guidance, and therapy became a cornerstone of my recovery. In the safe space of a counselor's office, I unpacked the tangled emotions that had accumulated over months of solitude and regret. I learned to recognize that my pain was not solely the result of Laura's actions, but also a byproduct of the unspoken expectations I had placed on our marriage. Through these sessions, I began to see the transformative power of vulnerability, a lesson that resonated with every step I took toward healing. While the wounds of betrayal would forever leave their mark, I resolved to rebuild bridges, not with Laura, for that door was firmly closed, but with the parts of myself that had been lost in the chaos of deception. I reconnected with family, members, and old friends, those who had once known me as a man defined by love and ambition rather than retribution. Slowly, I allowed new relationships to blossom, ones that were rooted in honest connection rather than the ghost of a shared past. I immersed myself in community projects and creative collaborations, finding that the act of giving back helped heal the deepest of scars. I volunteered at local shelters, organized art exhibits that explored themes of transformation, and even began mentoring young professionals who, like me, had once struggled under the weight of unrealistic expectations. With every act of kindness, I reclaimed a piece of the self that had been lost in the turmoil of my former life. As autumn yielded to winter, I found solace in the quiet rhythms of change. The bitter cold and stark landscapes mirrored my own inner journey, a transformation marked by both loss and the tentative promise of renewal. I often revisited the park where Laura and I had met that fateful day, each visit a silent acknowledgement of the past and a promise to embrace the future with open eyes and a resolute heart. One crisp morning, as I sat in a small cafe and watched the world stir awake, I reflected on the long, arduous road that had brought me here. I realized that the calculated revenge that once fueled my every thought had given way to a deeper understanding of life's unpredictable nature. The dossier of evidence, the public humiliation, and the subsequent isolation had all been steps in a painful pilgrimage toward self-discovery, a journey that, despite its agonizing detours, had ultimately led me to a place of cautious peace. In that quiet moment, I acknowledged that the past could never be undone, but its lessons could illuminate a path forward. The betrayal, as raw and searing as it had been, was now just one chapter in a much larger story, a story of resilience, redemption, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. I began to view my ordeal not as an end, but as a crucible, a transformative experience that stripped away the inauthentic layers of my former existence. With each passing day, I learned to forgive not out of weakness, but as a deliberate act of reclaiming my power. The process was neither linear nor without setbacks, but it was genuine, a slow, steady reclamation of my identity and autonomy. Immersed myself in creative writing, channeling the raw material of my experiences into stories that sought to explore the complex interplay of love, betrayal, and the possibility of renewal. Through writing, I began to see that every scar carried a story, and every story had the potential to inspire transformation in others who faced similar demons. In sharing my journey with an audience of strangers, I found not only solace but a sense of connection, a shared understanding that pain, however profound, could ultimately lead to rebirth. As winter slowly gave way to the tentative buds of spring, I stepped outside one morning and felt, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the warmth of sunlight on my face without the sting of old wounds. The crisp air carried with it the promise of new beginnings, a reminder that even the coldest winters eventually yield to the hopeful light of spring. In that moment, I allowed myself a quiet smile. I was not the man defined by vengeance or heartbreak. I was a man who had traversed the darkest valleys and emerged with a deeper understanding of his own resilience. I understood now that while revenge might momentarily satisfy a wounded ego, it was ultimately a hollow pursuit, one that left behind more emptiness than fulfillment. True healing came from within, through the courageous act of embracing one's vulnerabilities, learning from them, and forging a new identity built on authenticity and self-compassion. In the months that followed, I continued to rebuild my life, piece by piece. I attended support groups and workshops, shared my experiences through blog posts and public talks, and even penned a manuscript detailing my journey, a memoir of betrayal, pain, and ultimately, redemption. With every story I shared, I discovered that I was not alone. Others, too, carried scars of their own, and in our collective vulnerability, we found strength. The conversations were raw, sometimes painful, yet they affirmed one unyielding truth: that the human heart, though bruised and battered, possessed an incredible capacity for renewal. I learned to forgive not only those who had wronged me, but also the parts of myself that had allowed the darkness to take root. In that forgiveness lay the seeds of a new life, one marked not by the specter of past betrayals, but by the possibility of forging deeper, more honest connections with the world around me. Now, as I write these words, I recognize that my story is far from over. The pain of betrayal will always be a part of me, a reminder of the fragility of trust. But it is also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a spirit that, despite overwhelming odds, can find a way to transform even the most devastating experiences into a journey of self-discovery and growth. In the end, I discovered that my calculated revenge was not a destination, but a catalyst, a spark that ignited a long, difficult process of healing. Through the wreckage of my old life, I have built something new, a life that honors the pain of the past while embracing the uncertain, yet hopeful promise of the future. As I close this chapter of my life, I do so with a quiet determination to move forward, carrying with me the lessons of love and loss, betrayal and forgiveness. I have come to understand that every ending, no matter how bitter, holds within it the seed of a new beginning. And with that realization, I step into the light of tomorrow, ready to face whatever comes with an open heart and a resolute spirit.